Did you miss me? Let's talk about my favorite nonfictions from 2024. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you are new. We are back again doing favorite videos from the previous year because I have 10 nonfiction books that I really wanted to separate out and talk to you about. So let's just jump into that. You know what this is about. It's January. These are the videos you're getting right now from everybody. So I'm going to start right here with Dead Weight by Emmeline Klein. This is a collection of essays about eating disorders, dealing with disordered eating, dealing with all facets of that illness and how it affects people. And it's a very delicately done collection where the author does the best that they can to not make these instructional almost in any way. One of the things they point out early on is a lot of the books that came before this, a lot of the memoirs and tell-alls and articles and things of people talking about their struggle with eating disorders almost become like a how-to of how to replicate what they did. So this is trying very hard not to look at very specific things about, like I ate this much or I did this to purge, but more about the personal and cultural impacts of eating disorders, how they affect people, and talking about sort of the culture of eating disorders, like the pro-Anna pages and things like that. And I found these very fascinating. I think this is a fantastic collection, particularly for anybody who has somebody in their life that has struggled with this, or if they are in a place where they can read these essays and feel kind of seen. It's going to be triggering in a lot of ways. It's not going to be for everybody, but I particularly enjoyed this collection of essays and I think about it a lot and I think it's important. So I wanted to put it on my list for 2024. Next up is Having and Being Had by Eula Biss. This is an essay collection where the author is exploring life under capitalism, basically. I'll read you what they says in the back. So, having just purchased her first home, the poet and essayist now embarks on a provocative exploration of the value system she has bought into. Through a series of engaging exchanges in libraries and laundromats, on bar stools and over backyard fences, she examines the complexities and contradictions of middle-class ethics. The result is an uncommonly immersive and deeply revealing new portrait of work and luxury, of accumulation and consumption, and the value of time and how we spend it. I thought these were just really relatable. They don't really give you answers to any of these big ideas or questions like, how do you live ethically under capitalism? How do you consume things and not hurt others? How do you live in modern society and uphold your value system? Do you always have to give something up in some way of your values to be able to function in modern society? I thought they were really excellent ruminations on these big topics, and I think they're very important conversations to be having. And I think they're very relatable. It's a very interesting collection, and I'm very glad that I read it. So this had to be on there. I think there's a lot of things that we're kind of always talking about online, particularly around consumption, particularly around just trying to be ethical with our consumption. And this speaks to a lot of that. It's not a how-to. It's not going to answer any of your questions, but it's going to make you feel more seen. It's going to make you feel less like you're struggling with these things kind of on your own. I really did enjoy this. Next is a book that I surprisingly don't own, and that is Committed on Meaning and Mad Women by Susan Scanlon. I absolutely adored this memoir about her time in this psychiatric hospital in New York and the way that she weaves in literature that speaks to the female experience of mental illness was brilliant. The bibliography in the back is like a reading list for me. I have so many new authors to dive into. It has started a little like mini brewing reading project of reading books about women and madness and mental illness, and specifically in their own words, how it affects them. It's a brilliant read. I loved it. I don't know how I don't own it yet. I don't know how I've not picked up a copy. I may have to remedy that in 2025, but I don't. But I still loved it. So anyway, that had to be on this list. The other thing that has to be on this list is number 4, which is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. This little book really, like, every time somebody held this up on BookTube or was in a blog post or on Instagram, and was like, I love this book. This is one of my favorite books, 5-star reads. It's this collection of letters between these two people post World War II. And I'm like, why? Why does anybody care about this book? Now I've read it. I get it. Okay. This is such a lovely, lovely little snapshot of history. It makes you have faith in humanity again. Like, it's so lovely. It's Helene Hanff writing to this bookstore in the UK, looking for different used copies of books. And over the years that they do this, they develop this friendship between her and all the staff in this bookstore. This bookstore, by the way, that she's never been to in person. She sends them care packages because, you know, in the UK, they have austerity post-war. They're still working with rations. In the US, everything's booming. So she's sending like care packages at Christmas with like ham in it and stuff. And so it's such a like wonderfully heartwarming, also sad, but heartwarming collection of letters that just really captures a time and a place. And you kind of want the nostalgia of this. Like, you want to live in a world where this happens. Like, you have these exchanges with strangers across the pond over things that you all love. You can grow these beautiful friendships out of it. I love the letter writing. It's such a lovely, like, afternoon read. Please read it. I'm sorry, I think I just hit the mic, but please read it. If you haven't, if you were like, what a silly little thing for people to be excited about, it's worth it. Read this little collection. I think I've talked about this quite a bit at this point on Substack and in some of my reviews for Jane Austen, but I read Jane Austen and Crime by Susanna Fullerton, who's like the head of the Jane Austen Society in Australia, I think. And I really think it's a brilliant addition to anybody who's reading. Like, if you're reading all of Jane Austen's novels, or if you're reading about Jane Austen, it's the 250th anniversary of her birth this year. So it's a great time to, learn more about Jane Austen. And I think this is a really interesting way to not just learn more about Jane and her family and things that happened to her in her life, but to also just learn about the Regency period, the time period in which she lived, through the lens of crime, and like everything was kind of a crime. So it's really fascinating to see what was a crime, how were these crimes punished, like what were the punishments, how did crime seep into Jane's personal life, how did it seep into her novels, what would the world have looked like for Jane. We think about these very mannered people. Meanwhile, there are highwaymen who have been caught and murdered and are like hung in cages along the major roadways to warn off other people from being highwaymen. And it's just, how do you marry that image with, women sitting in frilly dresses and sipping tea in a drawing room? It provides such a wonderful backdrop for her novels and for understanding her as a writer. And Fullerton talks a lot about a couple books in this. Emma, a lot about Mansfield and a lot about the juvenilia, because in Austen's juvenilia, you see a lot more crime. Her juvenilia seems more playful and fun and over the top. There's a little bit more murderous, and I am looking forward to reading her juvenilia. I have the cloth-bound edition of her early works, and the Watsons, I think, is in there as well. So I'm going to be hopefully getting to those this year, because I need to know what they are, especially after reading Jane Austen and Crime. I'm like, I need to know what's in these silly little stories that weren't published, because I know her published work so well. What are these other, like, more fun, young, youthful, silly stories? So yeah, if you can get your hands on it, it's hard to find. I think it was sort of independently self-pubbed somewhere in that vein, maybe through like the Jane Austen Society or something like that. So it is a bit difficult to find. I know you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on your Kindle, but to get a hard copy, I don't know. Maybe if you're in Australia, it's easier, but if you can secure yourself a copy, and if you are a Janeite, I highly recommend it. Next, number 6 is Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives by Siddharth Kara. I need everybody to read this. This is such an important read for our current times. Everything you consume that has a rechargeable lithium battery is made with human labor. It costs lives. The suffering that is at the bottom of this supply chain is so huge, and I don't know how you even begin to correct what's going on. Every company that can tell you they source the cobalt ethically is lying to you, because there's no way, based on how it's actually mined and collected and sold and auctioned off and eventually makes its way to the London Exchange, how that whole process works. There's really no way to actually say that your company does this ethically, because you don't, because nobody does. This is such a hard read, such a must read. It's emotional, it's sad. Please pick this book up. It took me a while to read this arc that I got a little while ago. This came out in January of 2023, and I read it at the end of 2024, and I'm glad that I finally got to it. I kept meaning to read it, and I knew that it was going to be difficult, and I put off picking it up, and I'm glad I finally did. And I think I picked it up at the time that was right for me mentally. But when you are ready for it, please read this book. This is have I made it quite clear that this is important? Please read this book. Next, we have a book that was nominated for the Women's Prize, not for nonfiction, not too long ago, and that is Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution by Bo Hannon. I really enjoyed this book. It's quite a heavy book, like physically. It's an interesting book. I think Bo Hannon does a really good job of making this not a heavy book to read. It talks about how the female body has changed throughout evolution by looking at not just, human evolution, but the evolution of other mammals. We look at things like how tools have changed it, perception, the differences between the male body and the female body within certain things, like how we hear and see things differently. In the brain, how there's just different changes that happen. I think the brain chapter is very interesting, because that could have very quickly leaned it into something really unseemly or dangerous, or it was a delicate chapter, right? She had to tread delicately with that one. And I thought she did really well with it. She talks a lot about how like hormones change our brains several times throughout a woman's life, from puberty to pregnancy to postpartum to menopausal. There's all these shifts and changes that happen in our brains for longer or shorter periods, and how those differ from, obviously, from men who have much more stable hormone levels in their lives. It was very, very interesting. I really enjoyed this book. It made me think a lot. I don't know if I needed the love chapter quite as much, but it was good. It's worth the time. It's worth the read. I am glad that we did this with the Patreon group, because I wanted to read it, but I wasn't going to read it on my own. So finally did it, and I enjoyed it. 3 more to go. Book 7. I have a review filmed for this, but I never edited it. So I might do that. I don't know why I never edited it. Maybe I didn't like it. We'll have to look at it. Anyway, and that is Madame Restell by Jennifer Wright. This is the life, death, and resurrection of old New York's most fabulous, fearless, and infamous abortionist. This book is fab. This book really shows you how women's rights, in terms of like getting an abortion, birth control, any kind of control over your body, how they were very much they went from being sort of controlled, but not really, because you had limited ability to do a lot of things. But in a lot of ways, you had a lot more say over your own kind of body in terms of, do you keep a baby? Do you not keep a baby? Where is life drawn? It wasn't until you felt a quickening, and that's quite far into a pregnancy. It's further than a lot of these abortion bans that we have rolling out across the US. And then you see how when you get to like the Comstock laws, you get this clamping down on a lot of the knowledge and the work that people are doing, particularly women like Madame Restell, to take care of these women and take care of them from not having to have 1,000 babies. There's stories in here that are heartbreaking, like mothers drugging their kids with like opioids because they need to go out and work because they're so poor that they can't just like stay home and take care of the kids. They have to work, but they have so many freaking babies that they literally like drug their babies into a coma, go to work, come back, and maybe their kid is alive. And so like there is this desperate need for family planning, and Madame Restell gives them this. She is this Irish immigrant that comes over and starts this life for herself in the US and ends up becoming incredibly wealthy. She may or may not have faked her own death. It is a wild ride of a book. It is fascinating, and I highly recommend it. I wish I had actually finished that review. I don't know why I didn't. But anyway, read this. This is fantastic. The penultimate book on this list is Filter World: How Algorithms Flattened Our Culture by Kyle Chikra. I really enjoyed this book. I read this early in the year. I found this really interesting and was hitting on a lot of things that I've been trying to articulate in my own life around algorithms, the internet, social media, this sort of feeling of a loss of control over your own life, and the loss of choice in a lot of things. Like algorithms are telling you kind of what to listen to, what to watch. If you just look at two people's TikTok feeds, you could have all the same interests and they could be vastly different because that's where the algorithm is pushing you. I mean, think about how many things you think everybody knows about because your echo chamber of the internet is telling you about it. And then you go talk to somebody else in real life and they're like, no, I've never heard of that. And it's because their echo chamber of the internet is talking about something else. And it really made me nostalgic for a pre sort of internet age. It makes me wary of things like AI. I think it's a very interesting book to read if you've been thinking about all these things as like I have, and if you want to fill in some more information to maybe find the words that you were looking for to express maybe your frustration with the world as it is right now. Yeah, I kind of miss the disconnectedness of the life I grew up in. I enjoy that there is this connectedness of the internet, obviously, because you and I are here, we're talking, we're sharing books. There's some really beautiful things about it, but there's a lot of things that can become very sinister. I mean, the way that we can radicalize people just through platforms like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook and their algorithms, and you just hook onto a thing and they just keep feeding you down this tunnel of whatever, and you can become radicalized to one idea or another. Sometimes that might be something good. Maybe you learn about somebody's suffering and now you know and you've changed and you're a better person. And sometimes you're on some sort of like crunchy to alt-right pipeline and maybe that's not so good. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think this is a great place to sort of start with any kind of diving into algorithms, the internet age. There's some books about AI I want to get as well, because AI is coming whether we like it or not. We were talking about it at work the other day. One of the physicians was theorizing that like things like derm that are very visual fields could be replaced by AI, but anything where you have to actually touch people, perhaps not. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. Filter World. I enjoyed this. And then finally, because I have to have it on this list, we've talked about this in my most recent wrap up, and that is reading Lolita in Tehran by Azar Nafisi. I love this memoir. I am so grateful to the person who recommended it to me, so thank you. You know who you are. I really would love all of you to read this. This is about a woman who was a professor in Iran. She grew up outside of Iran, or spent some time outside of Iran, came back. She lived through the Iranian Revolution. She lives through the Iran-Iraq War. She lives through all the changes that happen at the university. She starts this little reading group with these women in her home to talk about Western literature that she loves. And the Western literature that she loves really is the backbone of this memoir and makes a case for reading classic lit, for why do we keep doing this. And I think it's brilliantly done. I really loved the way that she wrote this. And I just, yeah, I loved it. Such a good book. And I will shout about it as many times as I can whenever I have the opportunity to, because I think it was phenomenal, must read. Yeah, that's all 10. Those are my 10 nonfiction books for 2024 that I think you must read. They are my favorites. I love them very much. They taught me new things. They made me feel things. They were brilliant. They were wonderful. And I hope that you read some of them. If you've read any of them, please let me know your thoughts. Let me know some of your favorite nonfiction from last year or just in general. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'm filming tonight. So I think I'm going to shut up. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.